Welcome to the podcast that shall not be named, starting for the second time. Uh, Technical issues will always
Take
ensue
one. Take one.
at the amateurs do 2 takes. I do 1 take. Um, Robert from my local LGS has been so graceful as to join me, and we are going to talk about being an American in Denmark and all things flesh and blood. So welcome, Robert.
Thanks for having me.
No worries. I like to have, usually at the LGS, we have very good conversations outside of when I'm crying about losing to Kano, because you're a very avid Kano player, which can be frustrating as hell when you're doing the maths on the I don't even want to get into it.
Avid doesn't mean good, so I'm all right with avid.
But I mean, reps and experience will often beat out a lot of other things. So don't count that out. But initially, the reason why I wanted to talk to you was that you went to the calling with some of the other Danish players. Let's start out with your experience at the calling. Who did you go with?
Yeah, it was. Uh, well, Jonas. I don't know if the listeners know who Jonas is.
They will find out.
He's a pretty good player, especially in the Copenhagen area. I would say he's one of the best ones. And Sebastian. And then some of Sebastian's cousins were there, and then there were also some others that I met up that were from other parts of Denmark. But I'm not super close with people that are from outside of Copenhagen, except for I talked to Jeve a little bit. I'm not sure. I think he's from Jutland somewhere, but yeah, I'm not that close with many of the Danes, that are outside of Copenhagen. So I met up with a few. Yeah, it was really fun. It was the first time I actually traveled for Flesh and Blood, like outside of the Copenhagen local area. I have been playing Magic for a very long time, like since I think Mirage Sealed was like one of the first formats I was playing. So I did travel a bit for Magic, and I grew up in the tri-state area, in New York, New Jersey area. So always a lot of competition there. So it's nice to kind of be back in that environment where people are competitive, and I've kind of like gone very much as a casual slash competitive player in Flesh and Blood, because I recognize that I'm not that good at the game. And it's a hard transition, right? From playing in Magic and usually placing pretty well to playing in Flesh and Blood and like just getting rocked most of the time. So I think it's easier to kind of just play, have a good time, and that was kind of the expectation when I went there. Was I'll play in the big event. If it doesn't go well, I'll play in the side event or a draft or something like that. And yeah, everybody was really friendly. Nobody was super rules lawyery during my matches.
Judge.
But I think it was run pretty well. Yeah, it was a good event, and there was a lot of people. I think it was like 600 people or something. So yeah, and I brought Kano because I don't know, I just wanted to push myself. I think maybe Reiner would have been a better choice, because like it was mostly Oldhim and Dromai that weekend, and Lexi, and Reiner has better matchups into 2 of the 3, and Kano is only really good against Oldhim. The other ones require like a pretty high skill level to win the other 2 matchups, at least like half. But it was nice. We went out to dinner one of the nights. I don't remember if it was both of the nights. We had tapas one night, and then we went to like a kind of bistro place in the more central. I don't know. Not much else to say about it. It was a nice time, and it wasn't stressful. The travel was fine.
I will say that that Reiner top 8'd at the calling. There was a Finnish guy.
I know.
Ollie.
I watched some of the podcasts that he was on. I guess or at least listen to. I walk my dogs a lot, and I have this like YouTube Premium, so I can turn the screen off and
Oh, yeah.
just listen to the podcast. And there's usually not a lot to look at. It's
No,
just
no,
two
no.
people like us talking at each other. Then it's actually quite good. And yeah, that was nice to hear a lot of the analysis he was giving on why he chose certain things, what kind of play style he has, and yeah, I don't think I'm there yet in terms of coming up with all those kinds of decisions. But it seems like he is a fairly active player as well.
Well, I did have like
So
20 years of playing competitive Magic before, as far as I. Um, Tell me what's it like being a fairly competitive Magic player and playing well, and then, like you said, like why do you think you're not doing well, or what? I think you're doing really well, and you're very good at like helping a new player like me. Obviously, we can't all be like S tier at the game, but what's it like being a fairly competent Magic player and placing and stuff, and then coming to Flesh and Blood, and then what's the difference?
I think it's just I probably am not like intuitively super good at the games, but I've had many years of playing against good friends and people who would just show up at the local stores. A lot of online play over like playing even like Magic Online for 15 years or something. If you're just grinding out packs, even if it's just as a hobby or something, you're still gonna learn all the sequencing, learn all the decks. I think a big part of Flesh and Blood is the matchup is a bit more subtle. Like you kind of have to know when you play one deck, uh, what are you actually fighting over during that game? And if you can figure out that one piece of it, then it really helps a lot. Whereas if you're just kind of like, I don't know, you listen to like podcasts, they talk about like, are you playing like on the value of the cards in terms of like, is this the best possible sequence that you have? Then I heard some other podcasts where they're like talking about uh, like expected value or whatever it's called, like kind of like that
Implied
poker
value.
style, implied value. And I did play poker like when it was pretty big online in the early 2000s, and I was okay at that too. But poker is also in a much different place where you're like doing ranges of hands instead of just putting them on certain cards. And I think that if you apply all those techniques, then you can kind of statistically do well at Flesh and Blood. I'm a little fortunate that I kind of have like a okay gut instinct because I don't think I have a lot of the analytical part that's winning. So I'm kind of just feeling it out, and that's not always correct. I mean, most of the time it's probably like I could I can make a case for a good play, but I think there's also a lot of other plays that could have been made and a lot of other like very um, probably more optimal lines that I'm not seeing. Um, and also not sticking to one hero. I think that was a big issue. I think I've changed my hero like 5 or 6 times, and I don't think you can be that good unless if you're like great or you play a lot. You kind of have to play one hero, maybe two, and just stick to it until you know all the matchups inside and out. And then I think it's pretty good. Like with Magic, I can't play any deck well. I can play like a few different types of decks, and I can play them really well. And then if you give me like a slow control deck, I probably will just be like an average player. But if you give me like more of the Magic mid range or the combo style decks, like I'm pretty okay at those because I played those a lot. So I think sticking with Reinar and Kano, I kind of tried to get rid of the rest of my cards, um, because I'm like too attracted to playing decks that aren't good, quote unquote good. I really enjoy playing a deck. Like the last big tournament I went to in Magic was this Grand Prix Bologna, and that was Legacy. So that pretty much means like play whatever you want, but just know that like there's a lot of really strong decks. and I was like, oh, I'll just play and have fun. And I brought like an opposition deck, and I came in like top 20 out of like 1,500 people or something. And but that's not a good idea, right? Like you don't go like if you want to win, you don't go with like a brew. And I don't know. I still feel like compelled to try to win on my own terms more than like what's the best deck. Because I think if I picked a net deck and just played it over and over and over again, learn the matchups, like I think I could do quite well. But I think I would also grow tired of that.
Well, there is some that's what I find interesting in Flesh and Blood. The more I listen to, actually, I need to take notes because I want to come back to what you got out of that talk with Wanji and the implied value concept. But what I find interesting about Flesh and Blood is this concept of sometimes, and I've seen it both in martial arts and I've seen it in esports, that sometimes when people do something unexpected, it can completely foul up the
Oh, that's true.
the opponent's game plan. And you've seen it in like sometimes a white belt will walk into a Brazilian jiu-jitsu gym and just
Yeah.
completely surprise a higher belt because they will do something unexpected that you're just not prepared for, and it's
Mm,
like, hey, nobody does that and you shouldn't do that, but it's like, oh,
yeah.
you know, you now have the upper hand. And you've seen it in also in like in I remember noticing it in Hearthstone and also in Counter-Strike, that when you get to the kind of the top
Mm,
tier, people get kind of used to the meta that's played, and then you'll have some underdog that's playing a completely different style that is like, oh, you know, people always go left here and they're going
mm,
right. Like, what shall we do? We have to think on our feet. And that's one of the things that I like about Flesh and Blood, that just like the or now I can't remember his name, but the Titanium Baubles crayon guy who plays Levia, right? He comes in and plays something like, and
yeah.
people are just, you have the element of surprise literally there, and that's
Mm,
what. So I have these feelings sometimes that when I listen to these podcasts and hear other pro players talk about it, I feel like,
yeah.
oh, it's all about math. You know, if you're good at math and
Mm,
you can,
mm,
then it's kind of like, I wouldn't say that the outcome is like certain from the get go, because if you can just play the
no.
value you things, then you're bas- basically checkmate from the outset.
Yeah.
But the feeling that if you can do something unexpected, you can foul up that game
Mm,
plan, and that's what the unpredictability of that in Flesh and Blood is something that's very attractive to me, because I myself am not. Well, I'm also very new to the game. I would still consider myself very new, but I'm not a very math guy. I am a little
yeah.
analytical, but I never did well, like really well at Magic or Hearthstone or whatever. Just
Mm,
I would consider myself a below average player, but I like the fact that you have that unpredictability factor that new
y-
players or lesser players can actually do well.
eh, yeah, I think that's something that I can do quite well with Magic is kind of build out decks. Like, there was a format that I played a lot like during COVID, which is called pre-modern. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's like all these sets between like fourth edition and Scourge, which is pretty much when they had like a different border on the Magic cards before they started using a new
That's
frame.
when I
Anyway, it's
played,
pretty much
like
it's kind of like a
alliances,
dad. It's kind
miraged.
of like a dad format, right? Like you have a bunch of like dads that were like, I loved being competitive when I was like between 15 and 25,
Yeah.
and now 15 years later, it's all of those sets. But like I pushed the format pretty hard, and now it's getting popular with like a lot of old pros. So I think they're pushing it even more. But I started to, I guess I was part of that like second or third wave of players that they kind of were like, oh crap, like this card pool hasn't really been exploited yet. Um, and I mean, they had exploited it, but I came with this another wave of players that exploited it again, and now there's like even another wave of players, and they're exploiting it even more. And I think what I'm good at is finding synergies, but I'm still kind of new to Flesh and Blood in the sense that, okay, I love Reinhardt, but I've probably played less than 100 games, even though I've been playing for 3 years or something, or 2 years, whatever it is. And with Kano, I don't know, like if you don't include like Felt Table where you're just kind of like learning sequences, then yeah, I'm probably like under 100 games with that as well. And I'm well over 100 games in Magic. I've probably played like 10,000 games or 20,000 games or something. So finding synergies and applying synergies to like a specific metagame to prey on it. The players that can do that like without a lot of experience, man, I'm a little jealous of those people. But also the card pool is quite small for some of the heroes. Like when you build a brute deck, you are kind of limited to roughly 20 to 30 play sets of cards, right? Like, or 20 or 30 different unique cards that are actually good. And maybe there are other cards that are like pushing it a little bit that you could say like, oh, this card is a little clever and it might catch somebody off guard. Like, sometimes the brute players will play like Cadaverous Contraband to kind of like recycle the Blood Rush Bellow, but it's still.
But you're playing
There's
around
not a
Blood
lot,
Rush Bellow,
a
right?
lot of those cards. Yeah. There's and there's not like other synergies like that are that powerful that make up for the math or the value-based playing in certain heroes. And other ones you can, when you had Phi, I mean, every card was like above rate, but then on top of that, it had like these combos with like the arm piece that got banned and the I think it's called Spreading Flames or something, and Art of War, and like those, there's just synergy there that probably isn't very hard to discover. But I think the arm piece and I forget what it was called, Stubby Hammers, I think. That wasn't like regularly played until it was played, and then it was like, oh, that's obvious, and then they banned it. Right, so there are some synergies like that would have been a cool synergy to find, but I wasn't that competitive, especially with Phi. Like I had no interest in picking up that hero. So I don't know, maybe there will be like some card that exploits the arm piece that whenever you roll a 5 or 6, you get like a plus on your weapons. Like maybe there's a card in the card pool somewhere that is actually worth playing, but it might need like another 1 or 2 cards to justify it being better than the Gambler's Gloves or even Goliath Gauntlet. But I don't know. I don't think I'm good enough yet at finding those synergies.
So let's talk about finding synergies, because this is something that I find interesting from a new player's perspective, and something that I've noticed that there have been a few cases in also in martial arts. For example, I don't know how many martial arts fans there are or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fans there are in the audience today, but recently, a few years ago, there was this new school of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu where in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, for the longest time, you've already said, you don't really use leg locks, because leg locks, they don't really work and they're easy to escape, and that it wasn't really a part of the game. And then there was this guy called John Danaher who just said like, oh, this is why we're not attacking the other 50% of the body. And then he completely changed the game. And now it's all about leg locks. He changed the meta. And in terms of Flesh and Blood, I just love that there will be these, like, for example, it's not like I discovered it or anything, but I had the idea a long time ago that the Sandscour Great Bow for Azalea, in my experience, had to be good somehow, because you are using it to kind of double up. You can look at the top card of your deck, right? And then you get the aim counter as well. I was thinking like that has to be good somehow,
Yeah.
And these and even Brian Gottlieb hinted at it at some point when he was talking to Fluke, is that there are, yet to be combos discovered and explored that I can't remember which hero it was. I
Yeah.
think it was Shiana or something. I like that there are like hidden synergies and the card pool is growing. That, but
Well, this game has this other aspect of you have synergies, but it's not like Magic. In Magic, you have ways to manipulate the deck like very actively, let's say. I'll give an example. In Legacy, you have access to this like cards that cost one resource, and you get to like dig through the deck in some way to kind of sculpt your hand. And in Flesh and Blood, you don't necessarily have. I mean, it's pretty bad if you're just holding cards in your hand because you want to optimize your hand. So you have to do this the pitch stacking way as well. So not only do you have to come up with a synergy, but in order to get that synergy consistently, there needs to either be like redundant cards in your deck, or you have to like know how to play the pace of each matchup and know what matchups this synergy is actually going to be predictably executed. And there are some matchups where you can't do that. Like you're probably not going to pitch stack against Fi, or maybe even Katsu, or like you just to block out. Like you better be playing a pretty unique deck if you think you can block them out to the point where you can then set up your turns, set up your synergy, and maybe every hero actually might have a good strategy with that, but that requires like you have to be a little creative, and then you have to be very good at the game, and you have to be very good at that specific skill set. Like a lot of the players that I listen to on these podcasts where they say, "Oh yeah, you did really well with such a," they just like very passively say, "Oh yeah, in my pitch deck I did this," and they don't focus on that as the part of the conversation, but you'll hear it. I remember when there was a guy, Pavel, I think his name was, and he was an Azalea player from Poland, and he did really well before all these new cards came out. And everybody was like, "Oh my God, Azalea top 8'd something." I don't remember what it was. Maybe it was a Pro Tour or something. But he just goes, yeah. He mentioned, if you listen to the interview, the audio quality was quite poor on that one. I remember that. But he said something along the lines of like during the pitch stack, he can set up this turn where it was some kind of like 3 of a kind turn. Oh, no. It was a tri-shot deck. So he had some kind of combo. I don't think it was very clear like how you actually played the combo. I'm sure the better players like looked at the deck list and figured it out. But he had something with like tri-shot where I guess he was like hitting them over and overhead with like rapid fire and bolt and shot and like something else. But that's not how most players play. Right? Unless if you're like very serious, you're probably not going to come up with a build like this. Then you're probably not going to learn how to play the matchups. And then in the matchups where the pitch stack is relevant, then you have to learn how to do that properly. I just don't think there's a lot of people that have that much time that actually are dedicated enough with one hero to do that. And I think if you want to be like at the top level, you kind of need those core fundamentals with the hero you like. And then you can worry about like, is my turn by turn value, like those fundamentals those should be taken care of ahead of time, because those are things that you should apply with every hero, right? Like, am I playing the best hand possible? Do I know what cards my opponent might have? Do I like all those range and things? Those need to be taken care of. But then, like when you see a person do well with a hero that is not commonly played, I think they're doing these other things, and I don't think that the majority of players, myself included, are doing those things.
It's interesting that you say tri-shot, because I remember asking some players recently, do you think tri-shot could ever be a thing? No, it'll never work. And
he did well with it. There was tri-shot and rapid fire and like endless arrow, I guess, and I think he had 9 Bolton shots, which I guess is quite obviously common now. But I don't know if it was. I don't know if people were playing 9 Bolton shots before that. But I'm also not like a big Ranger player, so somebody would have to like maybe fact check me on that.
Yeah, but it's interesting exactly that that there's some undiscovered combo, because obviously as a sailor the big problem is getting access to loading your bow or loading your arsenal more than once, which Lexi can do with Voltaire very easily. But yeah.
Well, he was playing the defense reaction that reloaded, and like it was really, he goes, oh, if I'm on the draw or on, he's not on the play. He's like, uh, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was kind of like I can play 2 defense reactions in 1 turn, and it's like he's thinking at that level, which might be obvious for other Ranger players, but like, how critical is that when you're designing your deck? And like, is he instinctively doing that, or did he play enough games where that came up once and he goes, holy crap, this is really good, I need to exploit this because other players don't have actually think about this, like maybe they're on a heavy dominate deck and then out of nowhere I have like 2 or 3 defense reactions out of my arsenal and your dominate turn is just not effective.
Yeah.
I don't know. These are things that like I think you have to be very mindful when you play, and you also have to like play test against people who are also thinking with that mentality.
I think also maybe obviously I wish I was a better player with some more gravitas to what I'm saying, but I also think this should be like a certain encouragement to new players who are like, hey, have you ever considered doing this combo? I think it's good. And some of the more experienced players will say, it'll never work. But try it, because you might be onto something. And we've seen that in the in the scientific community for years and years, and the establishment will say no, that can never work, or this formula will never work, and someone will actually find a way to make it work. And that, I think that should be an encouragement to new players, that just because the good players don't play it doesn't mean it's not good. Maybe you can make it work.
Yeah. And some cards are just not good by themselves, right? Like you can have a very low powered card that happens to be very good with other cards, right? That's like a very common approach, I guess, when they design cards, is that they're meant to have these synergies together, and we don't know like what synergies the designers put together, which ones they are like, okay, this is pretty strong, but unless if somebody finds it, there's a chance that it can be exploited. And who knows, like when they start pushing like to some power creep, because it's just kind of inevitable to keep the game interesting, then people are maybe less likely to try these combinations, and the more spread out the combinations are in terms of the sets, the less likely they are to if they're not in the same set, you're not going to find it in limited. And I think that's where a lot of power of these cards is first identified, right? Like you have a draft deck and you end up playing the 30 cards and you're not really that sure about the 30th card, but it comes up and it wins you the game. And you say, oh, wait a minute, this card's actually quite good. Let me try it and construct it, and then it becomes like a staple. And you just didn't think like it was that powerful. But if like a synergy takes place with 3 different cards, like what's a good example? With Reinar, with this Berserk deck, which is like, I tried like coming up with other ways of doing it, and I think the guy's version is actually quite good. Like I'm having difficulty trying to replace certain cards out of it. Yeah. Having this combination of Berserk, mainboarding the skull horn, and the sand sketch plan, like those 3 together, when you have all 3 of those on one turn, if you have enough resources, it kind of feels like you're cheating a little bit.
Once the Berserk engine gets going, then the fun happens.
Yeah, and it's the problem is it's like there's not enough synergies in that deck that you can consistently have that. Where if you looked at Chain or Briar, or maybe not Briar, definitely Chain, where you had the boots, creepers, spellbound creepers, and you could just get an action point like for 1 resource, and you don't have to be that clever with, once you know how that interaction works, which isn't very intuitive to a new player, but once you learn how that interaction works, you're just like, I'll just play this card with Go Again and see how that works. And so
Yeah.
then people start testing the different Go Again cards. But with Rhinar, if you're in that build, now you have like this massive constraint against your list. But maybe the correct Berserk build is actually a deck that mostly plays a safer Rhinar, and then you have like this like 5, 6, 7 cards, and you can pitch stack in a way that works well with it. And I don't know, maybe that's correct, maybe that's totally wrong, but I'm not probably going to put in the time to actually figure that out. So if somebody else wants to try that out, great. And if they don't, then maybe that is like the best build that doesn't get discovered.
Yeah.
But it's also a terrible build. It could be like a terrible idea, and then somebody puts in all the time, and it's just like a waste of time.
Yeah, but I mean, for the longest time, we were seeing on Rhina that people are playing these mid-rangey, kind of with not a lot of non-sixes, but more non-sixes and D-reacts, and then someone came in and went really well with the Meat Axe build, which had like almost no non-sixes and just reliably just swinging the axe, swinging the axe, swinging the axe. That, I mean, that's another nuance that I like about Flesh and Blood, that it's you can play like the different heroes. Like obviously Rhina is pretty much locked into around some certain cards. They are locked into, okay, they have to wait for Blood Rush Bellow to make those like 15 to 20 damage turns, and then basically just, I wouldn't say turtle until there, but just play the value game until you can set up those combo turns. Kind of like Briar is waiting for the Channel Mount Heroic turn. But then you, like you said, you have a player like Chain or someone like Bravo who has, well, obviously Bravo is also waiting for that big Polarized turn. But you have decks that can just deal consistent damage over time, and that's an interesting nuance, that sometimes you can play like a slow, steady attrition of the opponent, or sometimes you're stalling, waiting for time for that big explosive turn. I think maybe that's a nuance that new players will find interesting, but also a good learning, because when you're starting the game, you don't think about, oh, I should just basically just be giving my cards to my opponent until this sequence of card comes up, and then I play,
Yeah. And in CC, the games are quite long. Like one turn doesn't usually define the whole game. Like at least across like your weekly events, right? Where you're not playing against someone that's like several like standard deviations better than you. You're kind of like, you're kind of in the same vicinity of skill, right? Like they're maybe better, but if you play them 5 times, you might win once or twice, right? It's very rare that somebody you play against at the local store just beats you every time you play, right? I think that's,
well, not for me. That's pretty common for me.
But it's just something where, I don't know, it's really tricky to say how that. Yeah, I think you have to be really patient in this game, and that's something that you don't have to be in Magic, because you can just win in one turn in Magic. In a lot of matches, a lot of decks, you can have like a blowout turn, and the game is like almost over from there. Like you pull away with so much, their hand doesn't replenish. You have a sideboard card that just like beats a deck, or there's like one card that you play, and because most of the cards are permanent on the battlefield, the play area, they have such a huge impact on the game that there are many times where it's like, it's more forgiving with mistakes, let's say. And with Flesh and Blood, the turn is dynamic. Like each turn influences the next turn, and you have to consciously make the decision, like, am I going to be patient, or am I like and that's where all those conversations about value come in, because they're trying to optimize that thought process. And a lot of players, I think, especially the ones that show up at like the weekly, the more casual player like myself is like just kind of going with their gut most of the time. And maybe you're off a little bit, you're correct sometimes, but the more you play, I think the more you recognize that you shouldn't be greedy. You shouldn't try to go for that like really good turn, because like from what I'm seeing is the good players are happy when they like get 1 point of value or 2 points of value out of the turn cycle. And I'm thinking like, how do I deal 14 with my Reinar combo? And it's like, well, that's actually a strategy that's going to end up losing you quite a lot of games. And I think that like the most consistent I've done with Reinar is when I was in this club build where I would block 2 or 3 and then just hit back with a romping club without the discard effect on it, or put a defense reaction and block with 4 cards that turn and then hit him with a club. And I don't know if it's not like skill per se. It's like you have a very dedicated strategy, and if you mostly stick to it, you're overriding your gut and you're kind of going with like what the other players that are more mindfully trying to eke out a point or two of value. Like I was just happening to do that because I enjoyed that strategy, but it wasn't like I wasn't actively thinking, how do I disrupt this hand, or how do I, of course, if I have like a Command and Conquer or Blood Rush Bellow, I might set something up over a turn or two, but it's I did pretty okay with Reinar in a lot of the events. I think I only played in maybe 2 or 3 ProQuest and 2 national events, and I think I used Reinar for almost more than half of them, and I just missed top 8 on breakers, I think, on each of the times I played Reinar. But I wasn't thinking about value and points and all this stuff. I was just swinging with a club.
But I think, maybe it just happened to stumble upon a strategy of the pros, because most of the pro players, obviously I haven't talked to a million.
It wasn't my idea. Like I was following along with Discord stuff. I'm not trying to take credit.
No,
there.
but it's like what all the pro players say is like, okay, pick up an objective or a plan and stick to it, for the duration of the game, because that's what will win you. And I feel it, like I have this tangible feeling of sometimes when I'm playing a game and I'll say, okay, the plan is working, and then I draw that hand, for Reinar. It's like, okay, I could ditch the plan and then go for this big combo turn, and then I go for the big combo turn and it misfires, I discard a non-6 or something happens, and then everything fell apart, and I could have just played it safe and maybe eked out the win,
Like one thing that I've been thinking about with Reinar is like when you have this constraint of having mostly 6s in the deck, like could it make sense to run time snap potions in the deck? Because that's like when you do decide that you want to go off and you have like a 30 damage turn, would it be nice to not have to roll Scab Skins or have a Sand Sketch plan in your hand? Because
I've been thinking about it. Also epots. I've been thinking about it.
Yeah, also epots, but then you're gonna have a lot of hands that don't have block. So then, yeah, and also when do you like if you have a pulping in your hand, which I hate pulping, but it does work really well in this.
Pulping.
Like I hate the no blocks, but they do work really well in the Berserk build where you need go again. You have a pulping and a time snap potion in your hand, like.
Yeah,
so
that's
what
a
do you
non-starter.
do?
Yeah.
What do you do? Like I guess then you're kind of like going into, well, now I'm playing the variance game. I'm playing cards that are supposed to increase the stability of the deck, but if I attack with a pulping and I draw and I discard a 6, then I play my time snap, and it's like, wow, you just kind of like cheated somehow. But if you play a pulping and then you discard a time snap potion, then your turn is over and your hand is probably quite bad, or you're stuck with 2 cards in your hand. And that's if you're playing this value game, like this terrible, terrible value there.
Yeah.
But then that does maybe kind of align with how LSS has designed Brute to say, if you're a little bit high rolly that day, it's actually the best strategy you could have. Like I had played in one of the pro quests, I had played against Prism with Reinar, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll just play with the claws, the mandible claws, and every turn he's going to try to put the 2 auras in play because it was at that time in Prism's game. I think Everfest had come out, and that was the strategy of spam auras. I'm just going to roll the dice every turn, and I'm just going to claw like every time there's auras on the board. And I looked at my paper when I was like rolling the dice. I was noting it down. I don't know if I was allowed to do that or not, but I just was curious. It was like 4-5-5-4-6-4-4-5, and it's like, well, there's no, like, if you just high roll, it wasn't like Prism wasn't playing against like a C tier deck at that point. It was like an S tier deck because I had 2 or 3 action points a turn with no
Yeah. Yeah.
downside.
Yeah.
Right. So can they make that class? Like I saw somebody post on Discord, like, oh well, if they ban scab skins, then they can actually give the class more cards. And it's like it's an interesting thought process that somebody came up with that, and it's kind of true. Like if you make the deck very good to begin with, but then you add this element of I can high roll you with bad cards and win, but if I can high roll you with good cards, like is that a good experience for the game? And I don't know, maybe it doesn't matter because you look at some of these other heroes and you're like, they clearly didn't care when they introduced something. But maybe it's like there's this element of, well, that's a different kind of fun and what's not fun, right? Like a lot of people don't, maybe losing to a dominated attack every turn that requires it just plays with really powerful cards. It's like that's kind of not fun. But is it less fun if your opponent has like 4 go agains and you have no cards in your hand to block with? Like, how many times will they play Flesh and Blood if that's their first or second experience? And maybe
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
have to think about that. I don't know. I'm curious what will happen when they come out with like a new brute, because you don't, like, you have Reiner and Levi or Levia, and
KO.
you
They're
really
young.
have. I mean, in classic constructed,
Yeah, but we could
and
see an
you
adult
have to
KO,
make
you know.
that. Yeah, that would be an interesting approach. Um, but you have Reinar, who has the intimidate mechanic, which like most people dislike. And then if you say, well, I want to play the something else, but I still like Brute, Leviah is kind of polarizing with her card pool and her ability. But if there's a third one, like now they have to think about, we designed all these Brute cards probably with Reinar and Levy in mind, and maybe Kaio or KO. Um, is it gonna like lead to like a Starvo kind of thing? Just because the card pool is kind of weird.
Yeah.
Like if they give a new Brute like the unicorn like blue 6/3 that
Yeah, yeah.
doesn't exist,
Yeah.
right? Like if they come out with another one like that and there's a new hero and the hero has an ability that has like, I don't know, whenever you discard, I don't know, maybe you gain 1 life or something like that, and then like maybe it becomes this like
A
really oppressive, like,
light brute that gains life.
yeah, like
Huh?
maybe it's like a new kind of old him that's just super oppressive. And instead of having like Winter's Wail, where you would have like pitch a blue and attack for whatever it was, you just have, well, now I can do exactly the same as what old him was doing, but now I have like pitch a yellow and hit you with Romping Club, and that becomes the deck. And is that like a good idea? And I think that it'll be really interesting to see what the next brute hero is, but I don't know. I think that right now the brutes are you have a lot of dedicated brute players,
I'm very
and
dedicated.
I think almost all of them are. I don't think you can like I put Reiner down for like a few months and I said, okay, I'm gonna try to learn chain and I did, but then he got banned shortly after. I was like, okay, that kind of sucks, but because he won like the Pro Tour, got like 200 points or 300 points, it just like knocked him out instantly, or Worlds or whatever the event was. Um, no, it just I think if you play Brute, you have to not mind losing
Yeah,
because it takes a long time to have like a win rate that I think other decks you can get that win rate a lot sooner, right? Like if you dedicate your time with Lexi or Lexi now, not Lexi like a year ago, or uh Oldhim or Icelander or any of the top heroes. If you put in the same amount of time with those heroes as you do with Brute, like come on, like it's you kind of have to like the class a little bit.
Yeah, but it's also because like when you start when you start playing, because Brute is so inconsistent, because you're learning, it will be very inconsistent to the downside. You will be losing probably on average more games because it's so inconsistent, right? And when you get better, you can get more consistent results and 50-50, 55% wins, maybe 60% wins when you're doing really good. I maybe wanna switch subjects for a minute because now that we're talking about switching heroes, right? The question going around recently is that is Flesh and Blood too expensive? As someone who spent a lot of time playing Magic and buying Magic cards, is Flesh and Blood too expensive?
Well, it is. I think. I don't know if it's like oppressively expensive. If you're in that kind of game, card game, collectible card game kind of environment, then you kind of know what you're getting into, right? But if you're coming from like another hobby, it's quite expensive. Even if you stick to one hero, I don't know. I guess I don't know what the math is on them, but let's just say most of the Majestics are fairly cheap, and you're pretty much just paying for like chase Majestics and legendaries, right? Let's just say you play one hero, one class. Like I don't even know what's a good representative class because maybe Guardian or let's use Brute. We talked a lot about Brute, right? Like, hey, I want to play this hero that's not that good, like statistically.
But also one of the cheaper ones, actually.
And one of the cheaper ones. But you still need a tunic. You still need a good headpiece. Maybe you could argue you don't. Maybe you could argue if I'm going to play like this Berserk build and just go all in on a build that is not really like, I don't know, a typical safer Brute build. And that's Rhinar, because if you're talking about Leviathan, you almost have like the Carrion Husk as well.
Yeah.
That is more objectively like you should probably have one in your 80 cards because there is some matchups where it's very, very strong. Those like if you're just looking at Tunic and probably Crown of Providence these days.
Scab skins as well.
Those and scab skins, which is not super. I don't know what it is. Let's just say 50 euros or something like that, $50.
Yeah.
And then you have a playset of Command and Conquer, which is pretty standard in most Brute builds.
Yeah.
Right. So, because those are really expensive compared to the other, like you could say, okay, well, Swing Big is like 10 to 15, but like let's just ignore all of the $10 to $15 cards because that's like a meal, like a $10 is what you spend on a burger. So, right. But you aren't going to say like, let me go spend $75 on a burger. Like if you have that kind of budget, then you're not really contemplating if Flesh and Blood is an expensive game.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. Like, but for someone who is looking to spend like between $20 to $30 on a dinner, and then you have to spend $180 on these cards, that's a lot of money to like play a game that you might only play most like once a week. Most players will probably will play once a week, and then others will play more, and I play less frequently than once a week. like with the paper cards. Um, like when I got into the game, I had one of my best friends growing up. He lives in Utah or something, but he was living in California at the time, and he was doing pretty well. He got one of those like extended tunic foils from the Road to Nationals, and he just I think he sold it for like I don't know $1,500 or something, whatever it was when it came out. And I don't know what it is now. Is it more than that now, or is it?
It's some ridiculous amount, probably. I don't
Okay,
know.
so
Go,
I
keep
won't tell
talking.
him if it's more. If it's more, and there was another guy that I played pre-modern with, and he's um, a Pedro. He's like on the Eye of Ophidia stuff, the French channel. But anyway, they both were telling me like you should play Flesh and Blood. It's really good, and I was like, I don't know. Like every game I play dies. Like that's not magic. Like I got into Versus system, the Marvel versus DC one
Oh
back
yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
2003 or something like that, and that died. And then I got into this other game called Anachronism, which was like a History Channel card game, and I thought that was really fun. That died. Um, and then I tried playing Netrunner, and that died. Uh, so I was like, oh man, should I invest like should I just spend my money on another card game that's not Magic? And once I played, I don't even know if I played any games before I got the cards, but I saw in like a Facebook group, I ended up trading like a fairly not significant for my collection, but like some foreign black border dual lands, some a lot of like legacy staples and kind of like reserved list cards from Magic. And I ended up getting this guy's collection, and he had like I don't know tectonic plating and scab skins, but like tunic, like E strikes, command and conquer, skull cap, like pretty much the whole
Shebang.
like a lot of cards. Yeah, so I didn't have to like go crazy for them, but it even had like some of the it was pretty much like Welcome to Wraith and Arcane Rising. He had like a lot of the cards, and I think he was just I don't know if he was competitive. He was a commander player in Magic, so he was like really into a lot of the cards that I had for that, and I think we totaled up like 2,000 or something like that, and we just traded like just heads up. Um, but I don't know if I would have gotten into the game if I didn't have access without just spending money, right? Like I didn't have to really spend money to get into the game, and I still ended up spending like a fair amount to finish off the decks or to pivot. Like at one point, I said, "Oh, I want to play Kano," and then I played a few locals, and they were like really upset with me playing Kano, so I said I won't play Kano anymore. And the same thing happened with Rhinar, and I kind of like kept moving around. I built a Prism deck at some point. I built Dashed. I built Chain, as I said, and just like all over the place. And to do that, like that was me selling some of my cards, buying some other ones, and I'm not very savvy with that. Like I'm more impulsive in that sense. So I was probably losing $20 here, there, every once in a while, just so I could like move off of certain decks. Um, but it is expensive. I don't. If I think if they push the draft format a lot heavier, and the draft format is good, um, then I think the game like when I looked at they had this thing in Magic called the DCI, and then they kind of moved it into this like Planeswalker points thing, and then they kind of like deprecated that, and then I don't know what they have, like an arena number now or something, like right, like you can qualify on something related to arena, the online platform. But before that, they had this DCI where it was kind of like the score that you can get on Flesh and Blood when you go on the website.
Yeah.
But when they killed that, you could download your history, like as a one-time. I think it was on a website, and then somebody built like a web scraper to put it into a CSV. So I have this CSV in my email, and I actually looked over it and I said, "Oh man, I played like 30 or 40 Pro Tour qualifiers like through my high school, mostly in like high school, and then just a few years when I got out of the military." And almost like 90% of them were sealed deck or booster draft kind of events. And there was no constructed. And I had competitive constructed decks, but what I actually enjoyed doing was playing at a competitive level where the format was exclusively like sealed deck. And I'm not very good at sealed deck compared to constructed, even in Magic. Like I'm a better constructed player than I am a limited player, or at least I'm a pretty okay at draft, but I'm pretty terrible at sealed deck. And if they pushed more of the format where you could actually be a purely competitive player, outside of the Pro Tour, but even in Magic, there were Pro Tours that are just strictly limited. So you can have a player that actually doesn't enjoy playing like a constructed format. Like I got my wife to play some Magic, and she refuses to play constructed, but she'll do like a booster draft or a sealed deck with me without a problem. I think that can attract a lot of players, despite Flesh and Blood being an expensive game. But it is expensive when you think about constructed. It's not really that expensive when you say, I want to do a draft for $15. Like that's fine. Like you're gonna go see a movie, it's gonna cost you in Denmark, it's gonna cost you like $4,000 to see a movie. So like what's $15?
Speaking of thousands of dollars, that tunic, the extended art gold foil tunic.
It wasn't gold. It was just like maybe it was gold, but I don't think it was gold. I think it was just an extended foil.
Extended.
What is it worth? You looked it up?
The gold foil extended thing, a graded copy, last sold on eBay was $30,000. The regular cold foils are like $4,000, $5,000.
That's probably what it is. It's probably the cold foil extended one, right? I remember he got like a playmat. He got extended art rainbow foil. That's what he got. Oh yeah, it looks like it's like on Card Market. It's 9,500 there's only 2 on there, so it's not a very good sample size. But he got like a playmat, and he got and the playmat goes for 300 euros. So it's like
playmats
it was
are
a
so
good
crazy.
prize.
Yeah.
Because he said his tournament, it was in like Northern California, and I think he played like Katsu, and he said he beat a bunch of chain players. It was only like 40 people. So imagine getting that prize for winning like a 40 or 50 person event, or maybe it was less. Maybe it was even 30 people. So.
But that's what getting in early is kind of like. He could have never known that this would be such a valuable.
Yeah, I mean, he was. I won't tell him. I won't tell him.
Let's hope he doesn't watch the podcast.
but also the community in this game is pretty open in terms of lending out cards to attract and get more people in the store. Like in Copenhagen, we had a year ago, we were getting 4 to 6 people like for the weekly event, and now it's minimum 10, which is really nice. We have like some regulars that are pretty much 10 people.
Yeah.
And I think if somebody were to actively say like, hey, I want to play this deck, can I borrow all these cards? I think we're able to help those people out. I mean, there is a level of trust of like, sharing your cards with a complete stranger, but again, most of the players are like kind of older, right? So kind of just saying like, well, this is fine. Like, this guy's probably not going to steal my cards. And
they have to get out of the store and 10 grown-ass men around them. Like, the chances of tomfoolery is...
I mean, it's also a small city, so like, what are you going to do? You can't really sell it. You're only going to sell it to like the same 10 people.
Yeah.
So...
But this was exactly my experience, and I've been talking about it a lot. And this is like why I think it's so amazing, because I was like, I came with the one majestic brute deck on the first, and people are like, I don't know if people said anything about my behind my back, but next time it was like, I remember, I think it was Kenny, he opened up his like binder and it says, hey, do you want to borrow the equipment? And then he pulled out like skull crushers and gambler's gloves and everything just in rainbow foil, which is like maybe like €100 worth of, yeah, you can take them, like see what happens, And I think most local scenes, if they are even remotely close to the friendliness of the one in Copenhagen, will be open to that.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that combination of like a very friendly kind of crowd that even if the people are competitive, they're not depriving the other player of cards, like so that their deck isn't at let's say a competitive list or a relatively competitive list. And that combination of also pushing draft. Like yeah, it is kind of frustrating that you can open like I don't spend a lot of money on cards compared to probably a lot of other players, but when I go to the store, I'll always buy like 3 or 4 packs or something
I've
like that,
noticed
just to
this
kind
that
of
people do.
and in Denmark, the price of a pack is pretty expensive, right? Like in America, I don't know what it is, $3 or $4 probably, but in Denmark, it's like $6 or $7,
But
right? So you're paying,
Faust is they are taking the here and now premium, because there are internet stores obviously in Denmark
yeah,
when
yeah,
you when you get where you can get them for, like, maybe I saw a Crucible of War not long ago for maybe like $4 or something. So it's like,
okay. But I still want to help out a store, right? Like
yeah,
that's the
and
whole point
that's
of like,
that's the here and
right?
now tax, which is okay that
So
stores too.
and it's fine. Like I won't stop doing it. But what is frustrating is that most of the packs that you open, like one of the guys, I won't give his name, but he bought a pack, he looked through the cards, and then he threw the whole thing in the garbage.
Yep, yep.
Like that shouldn't be a thing. Like it is a thing, but that shouldn't be a thing. Like that the cards have so much variance between, like, I understand if you buy a pack, um, maybe it's not possible to have every card worth something more than zero, but like it was effectively worth zero because you just threw it away. And if they make the cards that need to be in every competitive list extremely hard to open, then the other cards are going to be opened more frequently and are going to reduce the price, and that's the bigger issue. So would it be okay if, like, I don't know, like a tunic was opened every 8 boxes of cards or something like that?
Well,
I think
that's
that's,
why they make reprints, right? That's why they
yeah,
reprinted
but
it in
even in the
Cruise.
reprints, it's still like, it's still not at that. Like if you start playing now, if you buy 8 boxes, you're not going to get a tunic. You're
Mm.
just very unlikely to get one.
Yeah, very unlikely. But they are talking about maybe it will get a reprint. Maybe Enlightened Strike will get a reprint as well. But I
But
see your point, because that. But then again, it's a very, very delicate balance, because a lot of people are frustrated with, for example, Pokemon, because
yeah,
a lot of the cards in there are not worth anything, but a
yeah.
competitive deck, on the other hand, is very cheap, because you have all the
Hmm.
cards dirt cheap, basically in every pack, and then you have the full art, secret rare, all of that
Yeah.
that are
So they
actually
so
collectible.
so in that game, are those collectibles of high value? Like I guess what the question is, like, is the game popular enough to sustain that business model?
Well, I mean,
Because right now,
I
like with Flesh and Blood, it's hard to get these expensive cards, but you also only have like 15 people at a weekly.
yeah, yeah. But
So
and
is it better to have 40 people with a bunch of uh $70 cards, or 10 people with $300 cards? That's just a decision that somebody has to make.
yeah, yeah,
And
for sure.
and right now they've made a decision that they're actually okay with people having this expensive hobby. But if you don't push things like draft, you're not going to have 30 people showing up to a tournament on a weekly, um, where the average deck costs $600 or $700. Like that was normal in Legacy, in the Magic format Legacy, but the cards were 20 years old. right? Like the cards were out of print for a decade. You have these cards that got released now. Like a card came out now and it's like $300. So is that
Yeah.
reasonable? I don't know. But talk to people who I'm older. I have a pretty stable job. It's a decent job. Um, $300 when I was when I was in high school, $300 for one card.
Yeah.
Even if I only needed two of those in my deck, like that's just not in the budget.
Back when I was playing Magic, like I think a Black Lotus was like I think it was $500, and
Yeah,
and it was like I can never afford it, never afford it.
but it
It's
but even not as the collectible ones, but like when I played a lot of competitive Magic when I was in high school, this was Tempest block, Urza's block, Mercadian Mass block, like these kind of things. Your average deck might be like 200 bucks, $100. Like you could play, but I still ended up choosing to play a lot of sealed deck and limited formats, and um, it was also fun when the sets came out. You would play these limited formats. I don't know. I think I'm very biased towards that, but I can see with outsiders that people really enjoy drafting this set. And I hadn't seen that with the previous sets, but I also didn't play during like Welcome to Wraith Limited or Arcane Rising Limited, and I honestly didn't play much Monarch, so I have a very small sets that were played. What I do remember was the Tales of Aria, which was like I didn't really enjoy that too much. Um, and then I think it was the one with Fi. I don't know if that was the next set. I don't remember what was the next
Everfest.
set. If there were,
Everfest was after, but
oh,
I was at a
Everfest was,
supplemental set, right? So
yeah, it wasn't
Uprising,
like a draft set.
no,
So then
Uprising
Uprising,
was,
and I was
yeah.
like, and that was okay, but it was still kind of like it was okay. And then this one, people seem to be very excited to draft,
I think
and
I think the problem with draft for someone like me is that um, it feels to me even more competitive and even more like skill based, because not only are you as a new player, and obviously I'm learning more, but as a
yeah,
new player you're getting to grips with probably having to play a class that you've never played before. You need to learn cards that you've never looked at, and the whole drafting process is like, holy shit, what's going on?
yeah,
And they're talking about reading the next player and forcing classes, and like, oh, should I pick
yeah.
this class? And now this, my first draft was a complete clusterfuck. Like I
I
ended
think
up
it does.
with, yeah,
Yeah, it does prey. I think it preys upon like players that don't come from another game that played draft, right? Like if you played a lot of draft in Magic, playing a draft in Flesh and Blood is not a very steep learning curve, right? You're most of the concepts are the same, and then you kind of apply what you use in Blitz and Constructed to this kind of how do I build my deck. But the draft strategy part of it, knowing how to prioritize certain picks, knowing to look out for signals. Like if you don't play draft in another game, like if somebody says, "Hey, well, what kind of signals are you getting?" Like what are you talking about,
this was
right?
my
But if
experience.
you're yeah, but if you're coming from Magic or some, I don't know how many other games do this kind of draft. Um, well, then that part is, I don't want to say intuitive, but it's a learned skill that you got from somewhere else. Um, but I remember like just you play with friends, you say, okay, we're gonna buy a box of cards and we're just gonna draft it, and then the winner takes the first pick of the rare out of the box, and that's 24 packs, so that's a table of 8, right? Like for 3 to MTA is 24, and then so you can do 2 drafts with 4 people. Maybe that's not the best decks because you might have some like overpowered decks, but you could do that and you play both, and then you can kind of keep like a little Swiss score, and then you just play for the rares in the pack and you enjoy the game. And if you lose the first few times, like you will walk away with nothing. But it's a little bit different than going to a store, and like it does kind of feel more like a tournament at the store.
Yeah, it
Whereas I
does.
think I haven't done it that much with Flesh and Blood where I'm drafting with friends. I don't think I've even done it once actually. But in Magic it was pretty common, and um the games are also a lot quicker. Like with Blitz, are you a big Blitz player? Do you
Well,
like Blitz?
I cut my teeth on Blitz. I think I have like more than 100 games on Azalea before Outsiders came out in Blitz.
Okay.
On Talishar,
Okay.
of course.
So Blitz is pretty fun, but I've like grown to really enjoy Constructed more. I
Yeah,
think
me
it's
too.
maybe because the the games are I can usually point to why I'm losing a lot more in Constructed, whereas in Blitz it's I think you have to play even more to understand like where your mistakes are. But maybe that's a bad assumption. But
I no, but I think in Blitz the advantage you have is that on Talishar, for example, a Blitz game will somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes. So the advantage
okay.
of Blitz is that you can have that many more reps. You can have more reps and learn the game faster when you're playing Blitz. But it is very, like they say, very swingy. Like it's one big turn
Yeah.
from the opponent or yourself, and then the game will basically be over. Where, like you said, over Classic Constructed, it's like, okay, have this tempo swing, and then you can maybe claw back tempo or 2-3 turns and maybe turn the game, or
It
else
would be
you
interesting if what if there was like a format in between,
30
right?
life.
Where you
Yeah,
have a you have a you have like a 30 life 50 card deck, and would that mean that like I don't know how you would designate, maybe you still have like a cap of two per card just to
yeah, yeah.
keep it simple. Um I wonder if the games would be like the legendary equipment is still kind of questionable sometimes. Like in Blitz, it's very questionable depending on the matchup. Like where you're actually saying, I'm gonna play this other card because it's a one-time effect,
Well,
and
yeah.
the game is so short that the one-time effect. Yeah,
Goliath,
well, that's a great one.
Goliath
For like
Gauntlet.
the
Yeah,
like a chess piece or a head piece,
yeah.
right? Like those are ones that typically take up the legendary slot for most heroes. But in Blitz, you can make a pretty good case for a lot of the decks that you should play a common slot.
Yeah,
What's this one?
backbone
Oh yeah,
strapping.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
So
far
in Blitz,
superior to
like
Tunic.
yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I'm sure somebody has tried it at some point, but like maybe with a 30 life format. I mean, I guess with the you have your Kano and your other heroes that are slightly more and less, whatever. But I wonder what it would be like. Like, would that actually say, uh, I don't need, because this is more based on your question of like, is it an expensive game? Like, the question really is Classic Constructed an expensive game?
Yeah,
But
there
not,
is
but
Commoner.
not,
You can play Commoner. You know.
no, but Blitz. I mean, Blitz is like a recognized format, right?
Yeah,
With
yeah,
with events and stuff. And it's like, well, Blitz is not really an expensive game, right? You can find some heroes where it's a cheap deck objectively.
yeah, yeah. For sure.
Constructed doesn't really have that for most of the heroes, but for Blitz, it is like I could actually say it's cheap enough, right? Like if you want to play competitive Blitz, it's cheap enough depending on the hero that you choose. Like don't play Chain, right? Don't play like somebody with like three legendaries in their Blitz deck, but maybe with a 30 life format, you can you have to make like a strategic decision to go with the legendary or go with like the more one-time effect. But I think when you go to the 40 life, you can't, right? Like you're gonna say, well, should I pick the Findall Spring Tunic, or should I pick the one that does it like one resource and I crack it and that's it? Or I forget what it's called, but
Blossom
there's like some
Spring.
kind of yeah. So in constructed, you would never, ever, 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 ever really go with that. Like maybe there's one hero where you have a gimmicky deck and you really need it that one time, but like strategically, it's not really a good decision to do one over the other. But maybe in a 30 life where the game might be over on turn 4 or turn 3, like if you're not going first, if they win on their third turn and you never get that tunic, that's still kind of like Blitz, but it requires a very extreme deck to get to there. Whereas in Blitz, like the majority of the decks do that.
Yeah, for sure.
So I don't know if they've considered doing that, but I think that could make a really strong case for you still have expensive cards. They still have a lot of value, but they're not absolutely needed. Like in Constructed, you do need them. I think if you're playing without 3 Command and Conquers in most decks, if you're playing without Tunic in your card pool, if you're playing without Crown of Providence, like your win percentage for the classes that typically utilize them will be less than if you had them.
Yeah, maybe Living Legend format will be 30 life, 50 cards.
That could be it would be a good way to test it. I mean, I would be okay with testing it too. Like it's a cool idea that I hadn't really thought of before, because I don't really think about the price of the cards, and I do enjoy Constructed, and I enjoy Constructed more than Blitz. But I think there's like what heroes could actually be better in a 30 life format? Is someone like Levia actually quite strong in a 30 life format? But 40 is just too hard to get, right? Like if you get a Blood Rush Bellow turn that deals 18 or 19 or something like that, that's a lot in a 30 life format.
Yeah, for sure.
Again, you might need Carrion Husk in that, and then Carrion Husk is one of those like kind of gatekeeper cards that you don't have. But the point is made that like it's still a game where you would have to figure out what is the value on this turn and what is this, and you're kind of like really interacting a lot more with the opponent. But 40 life with Levia is kind of like, oh, I deal 19 and you're like halfway there.
Maybe.
I better have to think if I should have. Do I have to block my whole turn and take 8 damage? But in a 30 life format, maybe that's not a thing. But I don't know. Maybe it's something worth testing.
What about the argument that, so for example, me being very enthusiastic about technology and gaming, I've spent hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on computer parts, cameras. What about the argument that these cards are more of an investment? Obviously, they are something you can enjoy, you can play with them, but they're also like an investable asset. So that kind of...
I'm not advocating that you shouldn't play the game because the cards are $100 each or something. When I was a kid, I would buy like a video game for $60, and what good is that after 6 months? No, it's fine. If it's within your budget, then do it. Especially if it's something you like doing. Some people like eating out, right? Like some people go to a restaurant every week or every weekend. In America, I was eating out like constantly, but here in Denmark, it's a little prohibitive.
It will literally ruin you if you do it too much.
Yeah. So let's say it just comes down to your budget. If it's something within your budget, it's a fun game. If you like gaming and if you don't, you kind of need like a kind of special personality to play these games and like live and breathe these games, because it's not like a regular hobby. It's almost equivalent to like someone who's obsessed with playing a sport or something like that, where you're thinking about it all the time. Like a competitive video game, or like I saw a fighting game who play analogy. Golf is a great analogy. It's also an expensive thing to do.
Gotta get those new clubs.
There's a lot of people that can't play golf because it's too expensive, right? So if golf is too expensive for you, don't play Flesh and Blood either. Like because you're not like it's not that much cheaper.
I'm
Like,
that one is going into a short, like golf. If golf is too expensive, don't play Flesh and Blood. Um,
well, how much is a good set of clubs? Like $500 or something? A
I
thousand
have
bucks?
I
Not
haven't
not
played golf in over 2 decades, and
yeah. So most of it is like and what?
my parents would pay for my membership at the at the golf club, and then they bought me a set of clubs, like steel clubs. But obviously, it was
Hmm.
like, oh, you gotta get the carbon fiber clubs to get the new and
True.
the special balls from the thing, and it's all about these incremental advantages that really don't matter to
Yeah.
the new player, right? Um,
Yeah. So like if you have a budget for golf, you have your clubs, you have your membership, you have some clothes that are probably more expected that you wear,
Shoes, you need
and
shoes,
yeah, shoes, yeah. But
cleats. Yeah,
once you have most of those things, it's like flesh and blood, right? Like you have your clubs, you have your shoes, you have your bag, and I don't know, the balls and stuff. And but then you have to pay for membership. You have to pay to like access a course. Maybe you're playing in tournaments and you
yeah,
have to
go to
pay
a
to
tournament.
compete in
Yeah,
those. Um, you have to go pay for the driving range, and that can add up if you do that a lot. So, but it's still very similar in the sense that you have this initial budget that is quite steep, and then you have like your long-term costs, which are actually quite negligible. And the Flesh and Blood is the same, like just like Magic is. Like, but Magic, I haven't bought like a lot. I haven't played Magic since a lot of COVID stuff. But before, I would once you've acquired like a certain set amount of cards, you don't need to spend that much on acquiring cards. Like my Brute deck is done, my Kano deck is done, my Chain deck is done. Like if I'm not looking for stupid things like foils, like the decks are done. Like I don't need to spend that much. And now my hobby is like $20 a week or something, and I that's cheaper than having a few beers. So if you can get through that initial hurdle, it's not an expensive hobby. But most people do struggle with like, well, do I save like $100 a month and wait a year and then I get into it? Like, I don't think that's like easy for a lot of people to
no,
like
no,
put that
no.
money aside. But really, like, and a year goes by pretty quick when you're older. But when you're younger, it feels like forever.
Yeah, and when you're younger, you have lots of other things that you want to spend.
But would you put away like $60 a month, and
No,
so at
no,
the end of the
no.
year you could buy like an Eye of Ophidia? Like, is that a thing?
Not when I was younger,
'Cause-
and much to
no,
my
now I mean even now.
well, now I'm putting money away for. Well, actually, now I'm actively putting money away for. Uh, Obviously, this being the sealed case, I like sealed product. I have FOMO'd into
Okay,
the Heart of Findle,
okay,
the Eye of Ophidia. I do have not a large collection of singles, but I do put away money to put into like cases
okay,
or
okay,
boxes, or also like stocks, and like because that's basically what all my
okay,
income right now is going towards, building my
okay,
future, like crypto, stocks, property, and cards, which is probably the
okay.
highest risk of them. But I'm a nut. I see everyone's faces when, like when I went to the LGS the other day, I got like an extra Prism promo in some cards that I bought, and then Klaus was like, "Hey, can I buy it from you?" And he said like, what do you want for it? You can give me one of those French history packs. And then everybody else was opening their packs, a little bit of degeneracy before the
Yeah,
local
yeah, yeah.
armory starts, and I was like, zip, in a bubble. I had just bought some cards, so it's like in a bubble mailer, and then in my
It's like
bag.
a sealed pack of the French history one, just so you can keep it.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, but
If
just
you
one pack, not like a box.
Well, I also have boxes. I have both boxes and cases. Uh,
Yeah.
of primarily the Italian, because they're so
Okay.
short printed.
But that's the one where you can open the Marvel heroes. Is
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
Okay,
And there are only
that's
six
funny.
thousand boxes of them out there, so it's like very, very rare
Mm.
box. Um, but
So
I
what are
don't
your thoughts on like the Magic thing with the really expensive
the one of
million
one.
dollar card now? Yeah.
Um,
You buy a pack and never open it and hope that nobody ever opens it. That'd be pretty cool.
no,
Like, what would the price on the pack be if they never open, if it's never found? What would the price on a sealed pack of that be worth?
I haven't speculated too. So basically, when I got back into during the pandemic, I got back into cards, and I was like looking a lot at Alpha Investments YouTube channel. I was like, oh, buy everything, get into all the cards, and I was like, okay, let me FOMO into a lot of these boxes. So I bought like boxes of Kamigawa and Time and Zendikar Rising and like all the newer sets. And then it dawned on me what Wizards of the Coast had become, and I was like, oh my
Mm.
god, all this money I spent it to these boxes, and they're just sitting there. And obviously, they will probably appreciate and value pretty well. But it's like when you see what WotC is doing. So you had Brothers War, the introduction of the serialized cards. Then you had, I can't remember, it was March of the Machines or it was the Aftermath that also had the serialized cards. Now you have the Lord of the Rings with the serialized cards with the One of the One. And it just feels like the concept is being diluted to the point where I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
say that it doesn't matter, because from a business standpoint, I think we can see from the sales volume of the collector's boxes and basically everything Lord of the Rings, it's going to be in terms of sales, it's going to be a smash hit. Like, they are selling boxes like
Okay.
hotcakes, and the amount of marketing hype there is around the One Ring, people are overbidding. Like, it's a marketer's dream. Everybody's talking about it. But in terms of a player, like, I saw the Twitter video where he was holding it, and it was like you could already see the Pringle, right? And it's like,
Okay. Yeah.
obviously that's just a part of what Magic cards look like today. They Pringle, and you can do something with moisture control and stuff to even it out or whatever. But it's like, I don't know. It seems like Wizards of the Coast, everything they test, it's getting more and more like traditional sports cards, which is
Mm.
also very oversaturated. And
Okay.
I don't know. It's just me. I just have a strong dislike for what Wizards of the Coast has become, because when I was growing up in the 90s, it was very special to me, and I had this very nostalgic feeling around it. And it feels like once it was bought out by Hasbro, the suits have moved in, and they've basically gutted the soul of the company, and that just feels
Mm.
bad.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't played in years. I mean, but what I did see, I was in Georgia visiting my brother, and I stopped up in a store to buy some cards, and I was also going to buy some Flesh and Blood, but they actually didn't have any in stock, which was a little disappointing for me. But I noticed that they had like set booster, draft booster, collector booster. And I was like looking at this, I said, wait. I just want to do like a sealed deck with my wife. I was like, what I would do? What is the pack that I would have got 10 years ago? Right? Like what is, and it was just this like concept of it's one set, but they're selling it in different, they have like a different market for each of them. And I thought that was it's a pretty interesting way to sell the cards. I don't know if that would, um, if that would be like reasonable with Flesh and Blood with it, the smaller player base. But it was just a really weird thing to see. Like, well, you could buy this pack of cards, and it was like $12 or something a pack,
Yeah.
but it had like a premium foil in it, and then the other one was like I didn't remember the prices, but it's like this is a regular pack. It has all the crap cards that you would get in a draft that might be good in draft, but they don't have value.
Yeah,
And then
you
there was
can,
like
and
this
you can
in
never draw the
between
good
thing.
cards in the draft boosters, right? So it's
Oh,
like,
really?
yeah, yeah. It's
Oh,
like
okay.
in the set boosters and usually only in the collector's boosters where you can get the good cards with the special treatment and like the really
Okay, like this
collectible,
special,
valuable
yeah.
cards.
So I have a funny question to ask you because you played Magic, you're talking about being nostalgic growing up, and you care about like a lot of the aesthetic kind of things. Have you smelled Flesh and Blood cards?
Yes.
And have you smelled Magic cards?
Yes.
Like out of a pack or if you have like a stack of cards? Why does Flesh and Blood cards smell like poison and Magic cards have like this sweet smell to them?
um,
Eh, do you
I
know what I'm talking about?
it's so obviously when I last opened Magic cards, that was back in the 90s, so I can't really remember the smell. Although I do have a sealed pack of revised lying around that I
Oh,
could open.
that'll smell really good.
But obviously I can't get myself to open that because that's just a fool's errand in my mind.
When you go to the local store, when you go to Pharaoh's, go in that junk box and just pick up a stack and smell it. It's gonna look weird if somebody's watching you, but then grab like a pack if it's a draft or something with Flesh and Blood. Just grab a stack of the cards or something like that. They smell like noxious. I don't know what's the right
I would
word for
just
it,
say
but like
I have noticed that they have a certain smell. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily noxious, but I have noticed
like
that they have a very
I used to be
particular
a
smell.
chemist.
Yeah.
I used to be a chemist, and it kind of reminds me of stuff that you shouldn't smell when you're in the lab.
James White is
So I don't
coming.
know if
Who
it's
is
like,
this guy? Find this guy. Send the Pinkertons after this guy.
but
Hello,
maybe
hello,
I mean
Wizards of the Coast.
maybe
We
it's
need your
like
assistance with something.
maybe it keeps the life of the cards longer or something. But like, I thought they came from the same factory, right? Like
Yeah,
that.
Cardamundi.
Then
Yeah, yeah.
they print in the same place. So why do they have a different smell? Is the ink
Maybe
cheaper?
maybe Wizards of
Is
the
the
Coast are
card
adding
stock?
adding some perfume to it that's actually like priming your
Yeah,
brain to
that,
like them more, just like cigarettes.
they have like all these like counterfeit tests, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
you say, oh, use the light test. Use this like, what about the smell test?
Hey, okay, here's a tinfoil hat. Ladies and gentlemen, put on your tinfoil hats. Robert might be onto something. Do you know that the Cynthia Williams, the the thing in Magic, she used to work for Philip Morris, big ass tobacco company. Do you think? I don't know. We're just dubious speculation. But
It's
you
big
are,
TCG, right? Like big tobacco. It's big.
yeah, yeah. Maybe they're priming you with some kind of trace amounts of
Yeah, you
nicotine
open
or
like a
something.
pack of cards and you're like, I don't know why, but I need a smoke.
I want to smell more. Smell them. Yeah, but
Oh,
that's
the
it.
other one that's not to be I'm not this creeper guy. I mean, maybe I'm pretty weird. I got these sleeves with chain
Yeah.
on them. Do you have them too, or do you have like one
No,
of the similar ones?
no. I have. I've heard that I have one set of dragon uh, shield things
Okay,
because I've heard
so
that
the
the
ones,
portrait ones they split in the sides.
yeah, they also smell
Okay.
very sweet,
Okay.
very sweet. Yeah, I'm gonna have to educate you on
On the
some of these.
smell of sleeves.
I bet if you had like one of these like what are they called? The ones that the wine specialist.
Yeah. Sommelier.
What sommelier? Yeah. Um, it, there should be like a sommelier for cards.
Here's yeah. Okay. Here's another short that we are going to do. We are going to be blindfolding Robert, the blind smell test, and da da da
I
da
could do
da
that with a
da.
stack with a little stack of cards. I think I could tell you without a shadow of a doubt what's a magic card and what's a flesh and blood card. I
You,
think I could do
sir,
that.
are on for that. That will be the crowning piece of my content creator's
And I could
career.
tell you what's a sleeve with the chain on it, and what's the sleeve that's not with the chain on it. I
This is
think I could
going
do
to
that
be
no problem.
hilarious. It's like this is a one and done deal. You talk yourself into a corner, sir. I'm going to bring a camera, and we're going to make sure that this happens at some point. Like that is too
All
good.
right, I'll bring the chain deck,
Yeah.
uh, with the sleeves on it. Yeah, it's a weird thing. But I asked some of the other players, and I just don't think. Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a very very weird thing.
No, but it is. I
But
have,
it's also more fun than debating if the cards are expensive or not.
but I have noticed that when I was, so it's not like I have never caved in and opened a box. That's why I have some modern singles as well. But I have noticed that when you're opening a box of magic cards and when you're opening a box of flesh and blood cards, the smell is different.
Different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So that'll be an interesting little test. I wonder if it's something that because I don't think I'm that like sensitive. Like I don't think I'm smelling things that others are. You know, I'm not. I wouldn't be the sommelier, or I wouldn't be like the
Smellier.
flavorist sommelier, right? Am I
Yeah.
saying it wrong?
No, I just thought you
Um.
said smellier because we were
Oh, that would be a
smelling
good
things.
dad joke. That's a good dad
Sorry,
joke.
I am a dad, so it just happens.
A
Uh,
smelly A.
a smellier. Well, um, so Jesus, it's late, but I want to ask you something. I think I want to
Yeah.
broach the last topic before we end this. Um,
Yeah. Sure.
so you're is it an are you an expat? Is that what it's called? But
That's what they tend to call. Yeah, I'm an immigrant. I guess you could say like I'm an expat, but I think that's more of like it depends on how PC you want to be. I think historically, white people that came from like the UK and America and Australia, they were called expats.
okay.
But I mean, really, I'm just like no different than any other kind of immigrant that's from outside the EU. Of course, if you want to label it, then fine. I think people will know what is meant if I call myself an expat or if I call myself an immigrant. They might have a different connotation, but whatever.
But my question is, so as someone from a foreign country, um, how did you find your way into the one of the like oldest? I don't know if it's the oldest LGSs because that was fantastic. But like in the middle of a foreign city, uh, finding your way into a game that you didn't play before? Like, were you involved in the magic
Oh,
scene at
but
Fao Cigar, or what? What? How did
yeah.
you
So
get into
what
it?
Pharaohs had a store on Skinnagill. I
Mm.
don't know if I'm saying that right, but it's a street in the city. Before they've had like all these different locations, it was like one or two stores. I was playing Legacy back in like 2006
Mm.
in Copenhagen, like, but not often. I would visit once a year, twice a year, and I would like if it was a Tuesday night, I would play Legacy at the store. Um, yeah, so I knew about it already. My wife, she's Danish, and she went to university at SDU in Odense, and I think I played at a place called maybe it's called the Dragon's Lair or something like this. I did that a bunch of times because she was in school there for her bachelor's, and but in Copenhagen, yeah, my mother-in-law and my wife, they lived in Hellerup area, so it's pretty easy to get into that part of the city. Um, so yeah, I think it was just a matter of like looking up a place and going there, and then I knew that name, Pharaoh Cigar, over time. And it just happened to be that. people were playing Flesh and Blood there. Which again, it was a very small following, like even up until about a year ago. Like 2, 4, 5 people or something like that. Like it's a very small community, and now we're finally starting to get some more traction. So, and
But
again, I got pulled into the game from my other friends that were not in Copenhagen, right? Like my friend in California who lives in another place now, and then the guy Pedro who I know through Magic through online. Um, they were the ones that convinced me to try the game out. Not like me going into the store and saying, "Hey, what's that?" I do remember seeing all the Rudy videos like in 2020, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm not touching that game. That sounds
it'll die.
expensive." Yeah, that is what the thought. I still have my I have my versus deck, my Sentinel, Wild Vomit Sentinel deck from Versus, like 20. It's a 20-year-old deck, and I still have it. Um, and I still have my Netrunner cards and stuff, and I'm, you know, so I think my wife is like, "Are you sure you want to buy all these cards?" Like, but the
Yes.
only thing I can respond with is like, it's more fun than Magic, which I didn't think I would have come to that conclusion. But I could have stuck around playing pre-modern. It seems like it's a great format. Like you have all this nostalgia. The format is like a limited set of cards. They're never adding any more to it. They're probably not taking any away from it. And you know, you can go to like a big event in Germany or in the US, and there's like 100 people, and everybody's like really, really excited to play and just be around each other. And I probably could have just stuck with that too. But yeah, there's actually a pre-modern tournament at Pharos, I think, in July, and I was like, oh, should that be like the thing I do that week if I want to play cards? And it's like, I kind of still like Flesh and Blood, but the other one would be kind of fun. Like I think the last time I played pre-modern was on paper at a tournament. There was like a tier one. That's a store in Denmark, right? Tier one.
Yeah, tier one
Uh,
MTG. Yeah.
so they had like a tournament in the summer like 2 years ago, and I had like a brew deck, which happens to be a good deck now, and I played in that tournament and I won that tournament. I was really happy about that, but I still think I prefer Flesh and Blood to that because I'm still like losing a lot in Flesh and Blood, and I'm like, I can get better. I can learn something, and I don't think I'm able to learn that much in Magic anymore. Like I have to play against somebody who's like really, really a great player to like. I mean, I enjoy playing the game, but I don't think I'll learn much if I'm not playing against someone who's like just objectively better. And there's plenty of people that are, but I don't think it's like that easy, especially in like a narrow format where I understand the card pool really well. But Flesh and Blood, I'm just an idiot. So
Well, you are definitely outside of me. It does seem that you are surrounding yourself with some of the best players in the country in Fao Cigar.
yeah, we're pretty lucky that we have like a bunch of clever old dads mostly.
Yeah, that's definitely the demographic. We talked about that in the store as well. Um, okay, Robert, I know that you have a YouTube channel as well. Right now, you have
Oh,
a chance, a few moments to just say anything you want within reason. But if you want to shout anyone out or shout your own socials out or anything you want,
oh.
now's the time, sir. And don't be bashful.
Um, I don't know what I'm gonna do with this channel.
You have almost a
I'm gonna
thousand
ramble. I'm gonna
subscribers,
rant.
sir.
Yeah, I have like almost 1,000 subscribers, and I've never promoted it before. So I don't know if it's a good channel, but it's also been around for like, I don't know, since YouTube started, right? So it's quite an old channel, and maybe just by having any content over 20 years or whatever, you'll have about 1,000 subscribers. So I'm not like I'm not sure what I want to do with it. Like I was posting a lot of music clips. I was playing music in New York about 10 years ago, and I would post clips or maybe play some chords over something and try to help out other people. I used to play like a very niche kind of music style called gypsy jazz or jazz manouche, and yeah, so I have a lot of the videos are related to that. I think like early mid 2000s, I was like uploading Tekken videos and stuff because I was really into competitive Tekken. I was never great. I would always come in like, I don't know. I could win some local weeklies, but if I played in like a big tournament, I would probably come in top 16 or something. So
Oh
I
man,
wasn't
why
really
did
good
you
at it,
say
but I
that
really
now?
loved it.
We should have talked about the whole Gorganian tome thing about Flesh and Blood being like a fighting game. Sir, what are you doing?
We can have another discussion
Yeah,
about that. But
we'll
I
have
lived
that.
and breathed Tekken for quite a few years. What else is on my YouTube channel? And then I started uploading some Talishar games just because I'm not even like speaking over it. I'm just recording while I play because I'm like not at a level where I'm paying much attention. I'm actually just happy to play like 2 games at night or something. That's enough. But I don't know. If you want to watch some Kano videos, then I think those are the ones that I'm primarily uploading there. There's not any dialogue on there, but if you want to make a comment and say you made a mistake, uh, feel free. I don't know if I'll respond.
How can they find it? That's the most important thing, Robert. How can they find you?
Well, I'll give you the tag in the description
Ah,
for
okay.
you.
Yeah, okay.
I have to see what it's called. Your channel. Was it good if it has like this like UUID? Oh, it's at Mr. Cakes.
Mr. Cakes. You heard it
So
here
I'll
first, ladies and gentlemen. Jazz Manouche and Mr. Cakes.
and some Tekken
And some Tekken.
and I have some Magic Online. If you like a Ruby Storm or Mono Red Storm, I came up with that deck. Some other people have made it a lot better. But it's mostly a lot of this jazz manouche stuff. So if you want to get into gypsy jazz, you could also reach out to me. I need to play more. I haven't played much since my kid was born, and he's 6 now. So
Maybe that's a good. If people start piling into your channel, you can see what content is popular. You know.
yeah, I'm not much of a data guy on YouTube, but it could make sense at some point. But I love seeing that I have like this Tekken video that says 16 years ago, and it's just funny to you have like a YouTube channel that has a video that's like 16 years old, and it has like, I mean, that one has 14,000 views, and it's like that would be pretty impressive to get 14,000 views on like a random Tekken video today.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't know.
I haven't reached
Right?
those
So I
kinds
don't
of
know.
numbers yet, for sure.
Like my Flesh and Blood videos, they got like 10, 25 views or something. But I'm not really sharing them so much.
But anything you want to share, if you want people to reach out, that's Twitter, Facebook, whatever. It's your chance, Robert.
Oh, I don't know. Reach out to me on Discord if you want to talk about Flesh and Blood. I'm happy to talk, and I have my computer open most of the time. It's Mr. Cakes, and then I don't know some numbers. If you find another Mr. Cakes, maybe that person's more fun to talk to.
I'll leave it in the under your portrait here. I'll leave a Discord thing with your Discord.
Yeah, I don't think I'm that active elsewhere on Facebook. I'm not doing too much, and I don't have a TikTok. I don't have any. Oh, I have an Instagram. That one's pretty cool. It's just pictures of my dog pooping.
Okay.
I don't know if that's something that people care about, but it's
we
called curb pooping.
curb pooping.
Yeah. Curb pooping.
This talk has had
You,
so many interesting.
you've asked a very strange person for a podcast, so I'm not sure if I should apologize or not. But
Don't apologize. You will have your 15 minutes of fame, sir, once we do the Flesh and Blood sommelier test, and I like just prepare for it because I'm going to have the blindfold, the whole shebang, the tablecloth. I'm going to make a whole thing out of it, a big production. And don't even laugh. I'm serious. Like, it's gonna happen. And on that,
well, we need to have like at least one other person willing to do it because otherwise the sample size is too small.
okay, we will have a lineup.
Maybe 3 people who will be willing to do it.
We will see if we can find other strange people to participate in this mad experiment.
I mean, if it's like a bunch of adults playing Flesh and Blood, I think we can find 2 others.
Statistically, the strangest factor should be high enough. And on that strange note, thanks everyone for listening to this extremely long. I think we've been here for over 2 hours now, even including the technical issues. So please, I hope you like this conversation. Thank you much, Robert, for being here and being my savior in terms of pulping and swing bigs. It was great. And to everyone listening outside or out there, see you guys in the next video.